All right, so let's start by talking about what are the emotional needs of children, right? So when we're talking about emotional neglect, what is the opposite of emotional neglect? The opposite of emotional neglect would be emotional attunement, emotional care, right? So let's talk about what are the basic emotional needs that children have. And again, this is not an exhaustive list, but this kind of encompasses some of the basic components of what children need in order to grow up to be healthy, happy individuals who internalize a sense of themselves as worthy and lovable. The first component is comfort and co-regulation. So what that means, some examples of that, is if a child is crying, if a child stubs their toe, or if a child is running too fast and trips over themselves, right? A child needs to be able to go to their caregiver crying and have their caregiver go, "Oh, honey, I saw that hurt," right? "Oh, that didn't feel really good." And maybe if the child is crying, the parent scoops them up, again, depending on their age and depending on the parent knowing what's going to be most supportive and comforting to their child. And maybe the parent patches up the bruise or the owie, right, on the child, gives them a Band-Aid and says, "Oh, honey, I know that really hurt. That didn't feel really good." That's an example of providing comfort and providing co-regulation. Not providing co-regulation might look like saying to the child, "I told you not to run," right? Or "I told you that you were climbing too high on that jungle gym," right? Of course you got that scrape on your leg, right? It's your own fault, right? That's an example of not giving comfort and not giving co-regulation. Again, co-regulation, another example, a more emotional example rather than a physical example, might be if there is a child or a teenager and they really wanted to go outside to play, but they can't go outside to play today because it's raining, right? Not providing co-regulation would be saying to that child, "Well, you got to play with your friend yesterday and you'll get to play with your friend today. So today you should just sit home and read a book," right? There's nothing inherently abusive or harmful about that, but that might not actually be attuning to the child's sadness and the child's disappointment of not being able to play outside or not being able to go outside and hang out with their friend because it's a rainy day. Right? So an example of co-regulation might be to say to the kid, buddy, you know what? I know you were really looking forward to being able to go outside and play today, right? You really wanted to go to the park to meet with your friend Jimmy. I know you love hanging out with Jimmy. And I know you've had the whole day having to be at school, which maybe feels kind of boring. And oh man, it's really frustrating and disappointing today that it's raining, so you can't play outside. I'm really sorry about that. Right. So, in doing that, and of course, that's not the only way that you could co regulate, that's just one example. But in doing that, it helps the child to see, oh, my feelings are accepted. Even my feelings of disappointment, my feelings of frustration, those feelings are allowed. I don't have to pretend that I'm happy when I'm not happy because my parent or my caregiver can accept and can welcome the entirety of my emotional experience. They don't take it as an attack on themselves as a parent or a caregiver if I'm disappointed with the decision that they make, or if I'm disappointed with them having to say that I can't do something. The parent or the caregiver is able to acknowledge, okay, I can still have a boundary with my child, but even in having that boundary, my child is still allowed to have the fullness of their emotional experience in response to that boundary. So that's an example of comfort and co-regulation. The next on this list is responsiveness and recognition. So that means that parents or caregivers need to be able to notice when their child needs something, right? So maybe their child is really needing help with homework and they say, "Hey, mom, hey, dad, after you're off the phone, can you help me with my homework, right? I really don't know how to do this." And so responsiveness is that parent coming to the child and saying, "Hey, I so appreciate you waiting for me to get off the phone. How can I help you with your homework, right? Or responsiveness might also be if a parent being able to notice if their child looks a little sad or if their child is angry about something and not emotionally or physically disconnecting from the child because they're angry or sad, but actually responding to the child and responding to the child when they have an emotional experience doesn't mean trying to take away the emotional experience. It doesn't mean, for example, if we use the not being able to go outside because it's raining example, it doesn't mean saying, my child's upset and this is my boundary that, it's not safe to go outside because it's storming or whatever, but my child is sad. So you know what, I'll just let him go outside, right? Responsiveness is not the same as permissive parenting. It's not the same as not having any boundaries. But it is recognizing what the child is expressing, right? What the child's needs are and being responsive to it. And responsiveness might look like spending some time and helping the child find something else to do when they're bored. Responsiveness might be saying to the child, you know what, I can tell that you're angry. Like, let me know about it. Tell me all the things that you feel angry about. There can be so many different forms and versions of responsiveness. But ultimately, at the core of that concept is the parent or the caregiver helping the child to feel on a deep emotional level, I see you and who you are and what you have to say and what you need and what you're feeling matters to me. And I'm going to behave in a way that it matters to me, right? So for example, if a child is crying, a responsive parent is going to go to the child and figure out what they need. And another example is, say there's a child who's normally happy and outgoing. A responsive parent is going to notice if the child's demeanor changes and maybe that child becomes kind of more inhibited or kind of spends time by themselves more often. A responsive parent is going to be able to notice, okay, there is a change in my child's temperament or my child's demeanor and be curious and thoughtful about what could be happening, right? Because what could be happening might be a variety of different things. It doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong or something bad is happening, but it does mean the parent or caregiver is going to notice that and try to ensure that the child's needs are met, whatever they are. And maybe the need is for privacy, but maybe the need is to be asked what's happening and if there's anything that's bothering them. Okay. So recognition, what that looks like is noticing what are the unique aspects of a child, right? So one example of providing recognition might be, and this isn't the only example we can talk about a lot, but might be, say there's two children and there's an older sibling and a younger sibling, and say the older sibling is struggling to get along with the younger sibling and, the sibling stuff that can happen. Say there's a day when the older sibling is actually saying to the younger sibling, you know what? You can choose what we play with today, right? Recognition might look like the parent or caregiver saying to the older sibling, hey buddy, I really recognize that let's just say the younger sibling's name is John, that you let John decide what to play with. That was really thoughtful of you. And I know that's hard to do sometimes, but I really appreciate you being so caring to your sibling, right? Rather than just having that be something that the child is expected to do. Recognition is also noticing the unique qualities of the child. It might be strengths of the child, it might be talents of the child, but it might also just be unique qualities of the child. Recognition might be saying, you know what? I noticed that you really like to wear comfy clothes. You're the kind of kid who really knows what feels good on your body. I really appreciate that about you, right? You love that hoodie, don't you? That's your favorite hoodie. What do you like about it, right? So just noticing little things about the child, helping the child feel seen and known, again, in big and small ways. Okay. Boundaries and guidance. This is what it sounds like, but we know that children need boundaries and they need guidance in order to be able to feel safe. So boundaries might look like saying, boundaries sometimes might look like saying no, Or boundaries might look like recognizing that a 14-year-old should not be driving a car, or that a 6-year-old should not probably be going out somewhere by themselves, right? Depending on where it is and the time of day and things like that. Boundaries are things that ensure that the child is kept emotionally and physically safe. So that might look like a parent saying, no, I'm not going to let you spend the night at this person's house that I don't know, right? Or it might look like saying, you can go to this place, but I'm not going to let you go to this place, right? Those are just some examples of boundaries. And again, the purpose of a healthy boundary is not to be controlling, is not to have the kid feel stifled, even though we can't control how a child might feel in response to the boundary. But the purpose of a boundary is to keep a child emotionally and physically safe. The opposite of boundaries might look like permissive parenting. So that might look like a parent or a caregiver who really doesn't know where their child is during the day. And again, I'm not saying that that's inherently wrong. There might be a lot of reasons why that's actually fine, but that's one example of how it might look. Another example of what unboundaried parenting or caregiving might look like is having the child, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about the different types of caregiving that can contribute to emotional neglect. But another type of unboundaried parenting or caregiving might look like the parent or caregiver sharing a lot of their own emotional struggle or emotional challenges with the child. So instead of the parent or caregiver being the one to give support and guidance to the child, now the roles are reversed, or the tables are turned, and now the child becomes the emotional caretaker of the parent. So that's something that can also cause emotional harm for the child and can can have the child kind of feel emotionally overwhelmed or confused.